Okay. Now the first law that's going to be passed through Parliament during the time that George Grenville is Prime Minister is the Proclamation of 1763. That will be the first piece of legislation or first law that is going to be passed through Parliament when George Grenville takes over the reins as Prime Minister. And what do you think this law was passed to do? Because we just talked about it. What?
The Indians.
To solve the conflict in the western lands between settlers and the Indians. So the first piece of legislation that's passed during the George Grenville Prime Ministership, so to speak, is the Proclamation of 1763, which is passed to reduce the conflict between the settlers and the Indians in the western lands. Now what the Proclamation of 1763 did is it established these two things. The Proclamation of 1763 established these two things. Now you might be surprised at this, because who do you think is probably going to get ripped off by this deal? Indians, but contraire. The first thing the Proclamation of 1763 did is it ordered all settlers to withdraw from all lands west of the Appalachians. That surprised you a little bit? You wouldn't think it worked that way, but it did. So the first part of the Proclamation of 1763, the law ordered all settlers to withdraw from all lands west of the Appalachian Mountains. And the second thing it did, which really ties into the first thing, after ordering all settlers to withdraw from lands west of the Appalachian Mountains, it reserved certain lands west of the Appalachian Mountains for the Indians. It gave them land. Remember, they weren't land grabbers, but it actually gave them certain lands. And what do you think was in those certain lands they gave them back? They made sure.
Their sacred grounds.
Their sacred grounds and their hunting grounds. So what it did is it ordered all white settlers to move back east of the Appalachian Mountains, and it also reserved certain lands west of the Appalachian Mountains to the Indians, which gave them back and secured their sacred hunting and religious grounds. Now, how'd that go over east of the Appalachians? Not well. It caused a ton of resentment from the following four groups of people. The following four groups of people were very resentful of the Proclamation of 1763. They didn't like it. So what you're going to do is you're going to tell me who the four groups of people are that really didn't like the Proclamation of 1763. And I'm going to give Andy the first chance to guess what type of people were resentful.
The settlers?
Well, I know that's too broad. That's okay. What type of settlers? What these settlers do when they got over there?
They were like
Farmers. Farmers were upset. Why were they upset? Obviously, because they wanted to settle and farm new lands west of the Appalachians. So the first group of people that were upset were farmers. I'm going to teach you a process here. You guys are going to go home tonight, and your folks are going to ask if you learned anything, and you're just going to rattle this stuff up of you, or just rattle it off. And you're way smarter than your brother Mauricio, and I hope he watches this on video. Okay. So with that said, what are the next group, young lady? Who else would be going to the West to make money? Or who else would be making money because of the people that went to the West? So who's upset besides these farmers who want to settle and farm the western lands? What other people are making money west? Not farming. Close. Not miners, but what else did people do in those days? Mining hadn't come up yet, but what else? How else did people make money? These guys, these mountain men that went west, how'd they make money? Well, hunting for what? For the meat? Fur trappers. Very good. Fur traders were the next group of people. Fur traders. Obviously, they wanted to go to the western lands because these were untapped. Lots of animals, beavers, etc. Make good money. Go west. Well, they can't go west anymore and trap, and most of the trapping they'd done east of the Appalachians was kind of wearing out, right? And so they were upset. Now, this is where you got to think deep. So, Josh, Who else is going to be upset? These aren't necessarily people that moved west, but made money on people that moved west.
So people who stay kind of back east?
They're very good, they're Easterners, but they're making money on these two groups of people that are going west. Who's making money on those guys? Come on now, think. I know, you know, it's not that you don't get it, but you got to think. Anybody?
People that sell the transportation.
Absolute merchants, right? Because these guys, these farmers that go west and grow corn, what do they do with that corn? They sell it to merchants who then sell it for a profit to people back east. Fur trappers, they trap these furs, they sell them to merchants who then resell them. It's just like you go down to Blair's. Okay, there's a person that sells Mr. Folger his stuff that he sells. Okay, that's a merchant. He sells a candy bar to Mr. Folger for 50 cents, and Mr. Folger sells it to you for $1, and that's how everybody makes their money. And the merchants are obviously getting those candy bars for about 25 cents, and that's how life works. So merchants are very upset, because they outfitted the fur traders who trapped in the western lands. They bought the products from farmers and fur trappers, and if they don't get anything trapped or grown west, they lose money. So they're mad. Who else might be mad that could make money from people going west? And it's kind of this is a tougher one. Some of this land in the west, and I wished I'd have done this in Bozeman, Montana about 30 years ago. What didn't I do in Bozeman, Montana 30 years ago that really would have been good?
Invest in land space.
Bought property. Okay? So these land speculators, and a speculator is someone that speculates, they buy things hoping to make a profit. A lot of land speculators had already bought land in the western lands hoping to sell it for a profit to those going west. Well, if there's nobody allowed to be west, they're sitting on property they're not going to make any money on, and they got money invested in that, and they're losing money. If I would have bought 5 houses in Bozeman, Montana 30 years ago, well, I'll tell you a quick story which has nothing to do with this lecture, but it kind of does. It talks about land speculating. So my oldest son went to Montana State University in 2001. And so I thought to myself, I'll go there and buy a house, and then my youngest son will probably go there, and I'll own this house, and these guys will room with my sons, and they'll make my payment, and I'll be a millionaire. I had this thought process. So I found this really nice house about 4 blocks from campus. And at the time, they wanted $170,000 for it. That would be like $600,000 now, probably. You know what I mean? Anyway, they wanted like $170,000 for this house, and I told this real estate guy, I said, "You're out of your mind." He goes, "Well, hard to believe, but I'm telling you, that's what they go for." And I told him what I kind of wanted to do, buy a house. And he says, I want to spend about $100,000. He said, "There is no way I can do that for you." I should have sucked it up, because that house in Bozeman's 4 blocks from campus right now, I'm just guessing, I'm probably not exactly accurate, but I bet it's worth $600,000 or $700,000. Yeah, if I'd have bought, just stupid. Then another friend of mine had a mother that's a realtor, and she wanted to sell me a 3-bedroom condo for $99,000. I thought she was out of her mind to sell it. I'm not paying $99,000 in 2001 for a 3-bedroom condo. My son bought a condo, same type of condo, for $175,000 4 years ago, and he sold it for $280,000 last year. So that's speculating. That's smart. Mr. Kelly that subs once in a while? He has 2 or 3 condos in Bozeman that he has purchased as an investment, and he'll make a ton of money. You got to have money to make money. If you could be a billionaire quick. If you just built a casino in Las Vegas, in a year you'll have it paid for, and everything after that's profit. The problem is you don't have the $3 billion to build it now. You see what I'm saying? And I like Andy, but if Andy goes down to Pinnacle Bank and he says to Gil, "Hey, I want to borrow $3 billion to build a casino in Vegas," as much as he likes Andy, and if Andy could pull that off, everybody makes some money, he's going to hand Andy $3 billion now. So you got to have money to make money. These land speculators were really upset because they had no land now to sell. Okay, but Grenville did it because he thought it was the right thing to do to solve the problem, because that was getting no better. So that was a good move on his part, although he irritated a lot of colonists. Okay, that takes us to our next subtopic then, which is putting the British Empire on sound footing financially. So does Grenville have to do that? He solved the problem of the Western lands, right? He hasn't solved the problem of weakness of British leaders yet, but he's going to, because is he a good leader? And he's got to transform Parliament into his way of thinking. The other problem is Florida and Canada, and that problem there, kiddos, to be honest with you, is something that's just going to have to solve itself, right? You're just going to have to get those people in Florida and Canada to come to your rule, which they did. So the biggest problem they have with the four really is what? The need for new taxes, right? And that's what's going to lead us into these issues that we're going to be talking about leading to revolution. So, in 1763, when George Granville assumed the leadership of Parliament, his number one problem to solve was putting the empire, the British Empire, back on solid foundations financially. Okay? Now, as I had mentioned before, Grenville expected the American colonists to help pay their share as well. Okay? And there were two reasons why Grenville said to the American colonists, you're going to pay your share too. Even though you're feeling a little bit independent because you've gone from 6 to 16 years old, you're still paying. And here's the two reasons you're paying. One is you're loyal subjects of the king. You are British citizens. And British citizens are going to help pay, not only in Great Britain, but across the world in our possessions. You're going to help pay this burden. So the first reason Grenville gave the colonists that they would have to pay taxes is because they were loyal subjects of the King of England, and that's what you do. Two things they say you do in America. Guaranteed dying and paying taxes, or going to jail if you don't. Okay? Also, even though they thought they didn't need it, and realistically they did need it, the second reason Grenville gave them that they had to pay taxes is they had to pay for their own defense. Great Britain is defending the American colonies from being taken by foreign enemies. And even though they didn't think that they needed to be defended, in realistic terms they really did. If anybody would have come over at that point in 1763, they could have taken the colonies like that. So Britain had to defend them. And to defend them, they needed money, and he justified the colonists, you're going to pay because we got to defend you. And to defend you, we have to have an army. Now you got to keep in mind that for almost 100 years, the King of England allowed the American colonies to do what? Rule themselves independently. In that 100 years that we kind of came over with the Mayflower and all that, that whole deal, during that time, was the king heavily involved in governing the colonies? No. He owned them, and he made sure they knew he owned them, but he kind of let them do their own thing. And we mentioned on Friday that did every colony have the same rules? No, they actually acted independently like crazy. So you've got to remember that this is a big change for the American colonies to all of a sudden be told by the Parliament, the king, you're going to pay taxes, because they're not used to them even really paying a whole lot of attention to them. When they start paying attention to the American colonies? When they needed money. Okay? So this is going to be a new experience for these colonies all across the world, especially the American colonies, to pay taxes. Okay? Now, Prime Minister Grenville was not an idiot. Okay? He knew that he had to take some measures because he knew he was going to meet strong opposition. The people were just not going to say, okay, we'll just pay these taxes. So he knew he was in for a bit of a fight. Now, he's not only going to be involved in fixing the Western lands, but he's going to be involved in passing several laws that are going to force American colonists to pay taxes. And these colonists are going to have to pay taxes, this is an important concept you understand, without being represented in the British Parliament. Are they going to have any say in how they're going to be taxed or what's going to be the taxes? And that's where colonists cried out for the first time that you are getting me involved in taxation without representation. How are you represented in the United States today? How do I have a say in how many taxes I pay or how I pay them? How does Randy Doer have any say? Go ahead.
We vote for state senators.
Right. Absolutely. I have a right to vote. I vote on the people that represent me. Now, do I always agree with what they do? No. But I got a chance to vote for Mike Enzi or John Barrasso or whoever ran. Okay, I had a chance to voice my opinion. In this last presidential election, did I have a choice of who my president would be? I did. Now, the person I voted for didn't win, and it wasn't Hillary Clinton. So what did I do?
Voting independent.
Yeah, I voted independent because I'm not getting political, but I just couldn't, as a history teacher, could not see a person with absolutely no political experience being our president. And I wasn't voting for Hillary Clinton no matter what. It had nothing to do, by the way, girls, with the fact she was a woman. It had to do with the fact that she's a crook. But anyway, so I voted for the independent fellow. Although I've been a Democrat my entire life, I have voted one time in my life, other than this election, for the Republican presidential candidate, and that's when I voted for Mitt Romney in the last election. And I voted non-Democrat in this election, okay? So that's a big deal to me. So that, my point is, I have some representation. I'm not thrilled to death with the representation we have at the present time. Congress I'm okay with. Okay, so I trust if Senator Enzi comes up with something, I'll probably think that's okay, and I'll trust if Senator Barrasso comes up. I'm not real sure on this Cheney gal yet, you know what I mean? But anyway, I'm not dissatisfied, but I have some representation. These guys, did any of the American colonies have representatives in Parliament? Absolutely not. So they're saying, man, you're taxing me, and I don't even have any say. Even if I agreed to pay the taxes, I just don't have any say in how I'm going to be taxed. And everybody's going to be taxed kind of differently here. Well, that's taxation without representation. Now, off the subject a little bit, but I think it's important you know what it says on the license plates in Washington, D.C.? Anybody that has a D.C. resident, you know what it says on their license plates? What's it say in Wyoming? It's besides Wyoming. Does it have any catchy phrase on ours? I don't think so. Big Sky Countries, Montana, right? You know what it says on the license plates in D.C.? Right on the bottom of the plate? Taxation without representation. Why did it say that on the bottom of their plates? And why would it say that? You'd think in Washington, D.C. you'd have absolutely the most representation. People that live in Washington, D.C. have zero say in the government. Why?
Because it's not.
Yeah, aren't they like, it's DC short for District of
It's a District of Columbia. There are no congressmen or senators elected from the District of Columbia. So anyone that lives and is a citizen of Washington, D.C. in this country in 2017 is being taxed without representation. And that's just their little protest on their license plates. True story. Isn't that kind of interesting when you think about it? So there is taxation without representation in this country. If you're a citizen of Washington, D.C., you are taxed without representation. There you go. Okay. Now, this taxation without representation became an incredibly emotional issue, and it's going to be a big part of our topic, which is, our overall topic, moving toward independence. Now, the first example of this taxation without representation is our next subtopic, which was the Sugar Act of 1764. This is our first example of taxation without representation. The Sugar Act of 1764. Now, Parliament passed this law under the guidance of George Grenville, and it was a real stinging blow to the American colonies. And it was the first example of taxation without representation. And the Sugar Act was passed in 1764, and Parliament really hoped to accomplish these two goals by passing the Sugar Act. Now, anybody want to know what the first goal was to pass the Sugar Act? The goal is to earn money back, but earn money for what? What's the first thing they want to earn money for? Specifically to the American colonies. They want to tax the American colonies. It's their first goal. They want to raise money to pay for the expenses of protecting the American colonies from foreign enemies. Okay? So they're going to tax any possessions they have in Asia too, but they're going to use that money to protect those. But as far as the American colonies go, the first reason, or first goal of the Sugar Act was to raise money so they could help pay expenses of protecting these American colonies from foreign enemies. Now, if they tax all of these British possessions, which they have not done prior to this, who does this take a burden off of, Emily? Who does it take a burden off of? So, all right, so we're in this class right now, okay? And you live in the class of Dewar. And all of a sudden I've got possessions, I've got Mr. Hoffman's class, all of a sudden I've conquered him, and all of a sudden I've conquered Mr. Riedel's class, and I got Mr. Wright's big band class, so I'm feeling good about myself. And I'm going to tax those guys for the first time. Who am I saving a burden on? No, not me. You are the country of Dewar's You've been paying all the taxes, right? Now all of a sudden I'm going to put some of that burden on Mr. Hoffman's class. I'm going to put some of that burden on Mr. Riedel's class, and I'm going to stick it to Mr. Wright's class because he's got about 80 in there. I'm really going to get some money. The burden's off of Great Britain. Yeah. So the second goal of the Sugar Act, very good, Emily, is to take the tax burden off of the citizens in Great Britain because they're now going to pay less than they've been paid because these colonies across the world are going to pick up the slack. So it was really a pretty good idea in a way. What's it going to do for American colonies? It's going to continue to let us be defended, right, Sally? And the second thing it's going to do is it's going to take a burden off those in England that have been paying the whole share. That was the goal behind it. Now, there were two types of taxes that came from the Sugar Act. Okay? Excuse me, one type of tax. What's another name for a tax? A